Drifting silently through the cold expanse of space, the Sentinel seemed like a ghost ship, forgotten and abandoned by the world it once served. Its hull bore the scars of countless battles, jagged lines of impact, scorch marks from enemy fire, and patches of mismatched metal welded together in desperation over the years. The once proud insignia of the Earth fleet was barely visible beneath layers of peeling paint and grime, as though the ship itself had given up on being recognized. The engines groaned faintly as they pushed the ship forward, their sputtering rhythm a constant reminder of how close the Sentinel was to falling apart. Inside, the corridors were dimly lit, the lighting flickering unpredictably. The air carried the faint metallic tang of old machinery, mixed with the scent of recycled oxygen. To any outsider, the ship was a relic, a floating monument to obsolescence, destined to fade into obscurity. But to Captain Mara Solis, the Asterisk Sentinel was more than just a dying ship. It was her refuge, her battlefield, and her home. Mara stood on the bridge, her sharp green eyes fixed on the star-filled void ahead. Her uniform, though worn and slightly frayed at the edges, was impeccably clean, a symbol of her unyielding discipline. She was a woman who had faced countless challenges, and though her reassignment to the Asterisk Sentinel was meant to be a punishment, she had embraced it with quiet determination. Mara's crew was as unconventional as the ship itself. They were the outcasts, the misfits, the ones who didn't fit into the polished, orderly ranks of Earth's fleet. Some had been sent here for insubordination, others for mistakes that could not be forgiven. And yet, under Mara's command, they had become a family of sorts, a group of individuals bound together by their shared exile and their loyalty to their captain. Among them was Chief Engineer Rylan Cade, a man whose brilliance was matched only by his eccentricity. Rylan was rarely seen without a smudge of grease on his face or a tool in his hand, his wild black hair perpetually disheveled. He had a mind that worked faster than most could follow, and his ideas often bordered on the impossible. It was Rylan who had transformed the Asterisk Sentinel into something more than it seemed. Deep within the ship's aging systems, hidden behind panels that no one but Rylan dared to open, lay the fruits of his genius. He had spent years salvaging alien technology from the fringes of known space, piecing together fragments of knowledge that humanity had barely begun to understand. The Sentinel Asterisk's shields, its weapons, even its power core, all had been quietly enhanced with modifications that defied Earth's engineering standards. To the rest of the fleet, the Sentinel was a relic, but to those aboard, it was a secret weapon waiting for its moment. Mara often found herself wondering why Rylan had chosen to stay on this forgotten ship. He could have been a celebrated scientist, working in pristine labs and earning accolades for his discoveries. But when she had asked him once, he had simply shrugged and said, "The Asterisk Sentinel is the only place where I can build what I want without anyone telling me no." The ship's bridge was quiet, the hum of machinery the only sound as the crew went about their duties. Mara's first officer, a steady and level-headed woman named Lyra Vaughn, stood at the navigation console, her fingers gliding over the controls. Lyra's calm presence was a contrast to the ship's chaotic state, and Mara relied on her to keep the crew grounded. As the Asterisk Sentinel drifted through the outskirts of humanity's controlled space, it seemed as though the universe had forgotten them. No one expected anything of the Asterisk Sentinel or its crew. They were an afterthought, assigned to patrol the quietest regions of space where nothing ever happened. But Mara knew better than to let her guard down. Space was vast and unpredictable, and the silence could hide dangers that no one saw coming. Standing on the bridge, Mara felt a strange sense of anticipation, as though the ship itself was holding its breath. The stars outside seemed colder, sharper, and the emptiness of space felt heavier than usual. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something that would shatter the fragile peace of their exile. The silence of space was absolute, a vast and endless void that seemed to stretch forever. For weeks, the Asterisk Sentinel had drifted through this emptiness, its crew lulled into the monotony of routine patrols. The hum of the ship's systems and the occasional chatter between crew members were the only sounds that broke the stillness. It was as if the universe itself had forgotten them, leaving them to wander through its cold, dark reaches. But then it came, a sound, faint and fractured, breaking through the static of their communication systems like a whisper carried on the wind. It was not loud, nor was it clear, but it was enough to send a chill through the bridge. Captain Mara Soli sat up straighter in her chair, her sharp gaze locking onto the comms officer. "What is that?" she asked, her voice calm but edged with curiosity. The officer's fingers flew over the console, trying to make sense of the signal. "It's a distress call," he said hesitantly, "but it's encrypted. The language," he paused, swallowing hard, "it's not human." The words hung in the air like a weight, pressing down on everyone in the room. Not human. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier boredom replaced by a growing sense of unease. Mara leaned forward, her expression unreadable. "Can you trace it?" she asked. "It's faint," the officer replied, his voice tight with concentration. "But I think I can pinpoint the source. It's coming from a region of uncharted space." Protocol dictated that they should report the signal and wait for orders. But Mara had never been one to blindly follow the rules. She stared at the screen for a moment, her mind racing. Something about the signal tugged at her, a strange feeling she couldn't quite place. It wasn't just a call for help, it felt like an invitation, a lure pulling them into the unknown. "Set a course," she said finally, her voice firm. "We're investigating." The bridge fell silent. No one questioned her decision, though the tension in the air was palpable. The crew trusted Mara, even when her choices defied logic. And so, the Sentinel turned toward the source of the signal, its engines rumbling softly as it ventured into the shadows of uncharted space. As they drew closer, the signal grew stronger, though no less fragmented. It was a haunting sound, filled with static and strange, distorted tones that seemed to twist and echo in unnatural ways. It wasn't just a message, it felt alive, as if it were reaching out to them. The crew listened in uneasy silence, the eerie sound filling the ship like a ghostly presence. Then they saw it. The alien vessel loomed before them, a dark silhouette against the backdrop of distant stars. It was massive, far larger than the Asterisk Sentinel Asterisk, and its design was unlike anything they had ever seen. Its surface was smooth and black, broken only by glowing symbols that pulsed faintly with an otherworldly light. The symbols seemed to shift and writhe as if they were alive, their patterns incomprehensible to the human eye. The ship was a wreck. Its hull was torn open, jagged edges jutting out like the broken ribs of some ancient beast. Whatever had destroyed it had done so with terrifying force, leaving gaping wounds that exposed the dark, hollow interior. Debris floated around it, fragments of metal and machinery drifting aimlessly in the void. On the bridge, the crew stared at the alien ship in stunned silence. Even Rylan Cade, who was rarely at a loss for words, seemed momentarily frozen. Then he stepped closer to the viewport, his eyes wide with a mix of awe and dread. "This isn't just a wreck," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is a warning." Mara's gaze flicked to him. "Explain," she said, her tone sharp. Rylan gestured toward the glowing symbols. "Look at those markings. They're not just decoration, they're some kind of language, and the damage." He trailed off, his brow furrowing. Whatever did this wasn't just trying to destroy the ship. It was trying to erase it, to wipe out every trace of it. The crew shifted uneasily, the weight of his words sinking in. Mara's jaw tightened. She didn't like mysteries, especially ones that came with this kind of danger, but there was no turning back now. "Prepare a team," she ordered. "We're going aboard." Before they could act, the Sentinel *S sensors flared to life, alarms blaring through the ship. "Incoming vessels." Lyra Vaughn called out from the navigation console, her voice taut with urgency. Multiple contacts closing fast. The viewscreen lit up, displaying the approaching fleet. Sleek and black, the alien ship seemed to glide through space with unnatural grace. Their hulls shimmered as if coated in liquid darkness, and their movements were eerily precise, like predators stalking their prey. The crew recognized them immediately: the Zareth Dominion. The Zareth were a name spoken in hushed tones, a race shrouded in mystery and fear. They were conquerors, their technology far beyond anything humanity could match. Wherever they went, they left destruction in their wake, their motives as inscrutable as the stars. Mara's heart pounded, but her voice remained steady. "What are they doing here?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. The Zareth didn't leave witnesses, and they wouldn't let the Sentinel escape. The alien fleet moved into formation, their ships surrounding the Sentinel like a pack of wolves closing in on an injured deer. The crew braced themselves, tension crackling through the air. Mara's mind raced, searching for a way out. The Sentinel was outnumbered, outgunned, and hopelessly outmatched. But she wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. "Shields up," she ordered, her voice cutting through the rising panic. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers." The crew sprang into action, their fear pushed aside by the urgency of the moment. Mara's hands tightened around the armrests of her chair as she stared at the alien ships on the viewscreen. The Zareth had come to silence them, to bury the secret of the derelict ship. But Mara wasn't about to let them win. The Sentinel might have been a forgotten relic, but it still had fight left in it. And so did its captain. The Sentinel might have been forgotten by Earth's central fleet, but Mara Solis had not forgotten what it meant to fight. And if the universe thought this old ship and its crew were no longer a threat, it was about to learn just how wrong it was. The silence of space was absolute, a vast and endless void that seemed to stretch forever. For weeks, the Sentinel had drifted through this emptiness, its crew lulled into the monotony of routine patrols. The hum of the ship's systems and the occasional chatter between crew members were the only sounds that broke the stillness. It was as if the universe itself had forgotten them, leaving them to wander through its cold, dark reaches. But then it came, a sound, faint and fractured, breaking through the static of their communication systems like a whisper carried on the wind. It was not loud, nor was it clear, but it was enough to send a chill through the bridge. Captain Mara Solis sat up straighter in her chair, her sharp gaze locking onto the comms officer. "What is that?" she asked, her voice calm but edged with curiosity. The officer's fingers flew over the console, trying to make sense of the signal. "It's a distress call," he said hesitantly. "But it's encrypted. The language," he paused, swallowing hard. "It's not human." The words hung in the air like a weight, pressing down on everyone in the room. Not human. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier boredom replaced by a growing sense of unease. Mara leaned forward, her expression unreadable. "Can you trace it?" she asked. "It's faint," the officer replied, his voice tight with concentration. "But I think I can pinpoint the source. It's coming from a region of uncharted space." Protocol dictated that they should report the signal and wait for orders. But Mara had never been one to blindly follow the rules. She stared at the screen for a moment, her mind racing. Something about the signal tugged at her, a strange feeling she couldn't quite place. It wasn't just a call for help, it felt like an invitation, a lure pulling them into the unknown. "Set a course," she said finally, her voice firm. "We're investigating." The bridge fell silent. No one questioned her decision, though the tension in the air was palpable. The crew trusted Mara, even when her choices defied logic. And so, the Sentinel turned toward the source of the signal, its engines rumbling softly as it ventured into the shadows of uncharted space. As they drew closer, the signal grew stronger, though no less fragmented. It was a haunting sound, filled with static and strange, distorted tones that seemed to twist and echo in unnatural ways. It wasn't just a message, it felt alive, as if it were reaching out to them. The crew listened in uneasy silence, the eerie sound filling the ship like a ghostly presence. Then they saw it. The alien vessel loomed before them, a dark silhouette against the backdrop of distant stars. It was massive, far larger than the Sentinel asterisk, and its design was unlike anything they had ever seen. Its surface was smooth and black, broken only by glowing symbols that pulsed faintly with an otherworldly light. The symbols seemed to shift and writhe as if they were alive, their patterns incomprehensible to the human eye. The ship was a wreck. Its hull was torn open, jagged edges jutting out like the broken ribs of some ancient beast. Whatever had destroyed it had done so with terrifying force, leaving gaping wounds that exposed the dark, hollow interior. Debris floated around it, fragments of metal and machinery drifting aimlessly in the void. On the bridge, the crew stared at the alien ship in stunned silence. Even Rylan Cade, who was rarely at a loss for words, seemed momentarily frozen. Then he stepped closer to the viewport, his eyes wide with a mix of awe and dread. "This isn't just a wreck," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is a warning." Mara's gaze flicked to him. "Explain," she said, her tone sharp. Rylan gestured toward the glowing symbols. "Look at those markings. They're not just decoration, they're some kind of language, and the damage." He trailed off, his brow furrowing. Whatever did this wasn't just trying to destroy the ship, it was trying to erase it, to wipe out every trace of it. The crew shifted uneasily, the weight of his words sinking in. Mara's jaw tightened. She didn't like mysteries, especially ones that came with this kind of danger, but there was no turning back now. "Prepare a team," she ordered. "We're going aboard." Before they could act, the Sentinel S sensors flared to life, alarms blaring through the ship. "Incoming vessels." Lyra Vaughn called out from the navigation console, her voice taut with urgency. "Multiple contacts closing fast." The viewscreen lit up, displaying the approaching fleet. Sleek and black, the alien ship seemed to glide through space with unnatural grace. Their hulls shimmered as if coated in liquid darkness, and their movements were eerily precise, like predators stalking their prey. The crew recognized them immediately: the Zareth Dominion. The Zareth were a name spoken in hushed tones, a race shrouded in mystery and fear. They were conquerors, their technology far beyond anything humanity could match. Wherever they went, they left destruction in their wake, their motives as inscrutable as the stars. Mara's heart pounded, but her voice remained steady. "What are they doing here?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. The Zareth didn't leave witnesses, and they wouldn't let the Sentinel escape. The alien fleet moved into formation, their ships surrounding the Sentinel like a pack of wolves closing in on an injured deer. The crew braced themselves, tension crackling through the air. Mara's mind raced. The crew sprang into action, their fear pushed aside by the urgency of the moment. Mara's hands tightened around the armrests of her chair as she stared at the alien ships on the view screen. The Zareth had come to silence them, to bury the secret of the derelict ship. But Mara wasn't about to let them win. The Sentinel might have been a forgotten relic, but it still had fight left in it. And so did its captain. The air on the Sentinel S bridge was thick with tension. Every member of the crew frozen as the Zareth's message crackled through the comm system. Their voices were unlike anything human, distorted, guttural, and layered, as if multiple beings were speaking in unison. The sound reverberated through the ship, cold and unfeeling, like the voice of the void itself. "You have trespassed into restricted space," the Zareth declared, their words sharp and final, carrying an undeniable weight of authority. "Surrender or be destroyed." The words hung in the air, heavy and oppressive. The crew turned to Captain Solis, their eyes wide with fear and uncertainty. Mara stood at the center of the bridge, her posture rigid, her face calm but unreadable. She let the silence stretch for a moment, her gaze fixed on the alien fleet displayed on the view screen. The Zareth ships hovered like black daggers against the stars, their presence suffocating, their intent unmistakable. Finally, Mara spoke, her voice steady and clear. "We're not here to fight," she said, her tone firm but not confrontational. "But if you attack, we'll defend ourselves." Her words carried a quiet defiance, a refusal to bow to the overwhelming power of the Zareth. The crew held their breath, waiting for a response. For a moment the comm system was silent, but the tension only grew. Then, without warning, the Zareth opened fire. The first shot tore through the void like a spear of light, its impact slamming into the Sentinel S shields with a force that shook the entire ship. The crew staggered as the deck beneath them trembled, alarms blaring throughout the bridge. The shields flared a brilliant blue, holding against the assault but groaning under the strain. Another shot followed, then another, the Zareth's weapons cutting through space with terrifying precision. "Shields holding." Someone called out, their voice tinged with disbelief. "But they're pushing us hard." Mara's fingers gripped the armrests of her chair, her knuckles white. "Rylan," she barked, "what's the status of your modifications?" Rylan, standing at a nearby console, was grinning despite the chaos. His wild hair was even more disheveled than usual, and his eyes sparkled with a manic energy. "They think we're just another outdated human ship," he said, his voice almost gleeful. "But my adaptive shield matrix is working. Their weapons are strong, but the system's already adjusting to their frequency." A faint smile tugged at the corner of Mara's lips. "Good. Let's see how long they can keep up." Another volley of fire struck the Sentinel but this time the shields flared brighter, absorbing the energy with less strain. The Zareth ships, sleek and predatory, began to circle, their movements precise and calculated. They were testing the Sentinel, probing for weaknesses, but they were not prepared for what came next. "Captain," Rylan said, his grin widening, "I think it's time we show them what we're made of." Mara nodded. "Do it." Rylan's fingers danced across the console, activating the ship's secret weapon. Deep within the Sentinel a low hum began to build, growing in intensity until it was a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to fill the entire ship. The crew felt it in their bones, a strange and unsettling energy that was both alien and familiar. And then, with a sudden burst of light, the Sentinel S resonance disruptor fired. The beam shot out from the ship, a shimmering wave of energy that rippled through space like a pulse of pure sound. It struck the lead Zareth ship, its impact silent but devastating. The alien vessel's shields flickered and then collapsed, the energy destabilizing its systems in an instant. For a brief moment, The ship hung in the void, its sleek hull trembling before a chain reaction tore through it. The explosion was blinding, a brilliant flash of light that lit up the darkness of space. The Zareth ship disintegrated, fragments of its hull scattering like embers in the wind. The remaining Zareth vessels faltered, their formation breaking as they reeled from the unexpected loss. On the bridge of the Asterisk Sentinel, the crew stared at the viewscreen in stunned silence. The Zareth were known for their invincibility, their ships unmatched in power and technology. And yet, they had just watched one of those ships fall, destroyed by a human vessel that should have been no threat at all. Rylan let out a triumphant laugh, slapping the console with both hands. "Did you see that?" he exclaimed, his voice filled with exhilaration. They didn't know what hit them. Mara allowed herself a brief smile, though her eyes remained fixed on the remaining Zareth ships. "Don't get cocky," she said, her tone sharp but not unkind. "They're regrouping." Indeed, the Zareth fleet was already recovering, their ships moving back into formation. Their movements were faster now, more aggressive, as if they were no longer underestimating their opponent. The air on the bridge grew heavy once more, the crew's earlier excitement giving way to renewed tension. "They'll adapt," Rylan said, his grin fading. "They always do." Mara nodded, her mind racing. The Sentinel had struck the first blow, but the battle was far from over. The Zareth were relentless, and their numbers were overwhelming. But Mara wasn't about to back down. Her ship, her crew, they were more than the Zareth realized, and they weren't done fighting yet. "Prepare for another attack," she ordered, her voice calm and resolute. "We've shown them what we're capable of. Now let's make sure they don't forget it." The void around the Asterisk Sentinel seemed to grow darker, as if the Zareth fleet's presence was swallowing the light itself. Their ships moved with a terrifying precision, sleek and silent, encircling the human vessel like predators closing in on their prey. The once vast expanse of space now felt suffocating, the stars above dimmed by the looming threat of destruction. On the bridge, the tension was palpable, pressing down on every soul like an invisible weight. Mara solely stood in the center, her gaze fixed on the viewscreen where the Zareth ships shifted into a deadly formation. Their movements were no longer probing or hesitant. They were calculated, deliberate, like a web tightening around its victim. Ryland's voice broke the silence, low and grim. "They're learning," he said, his usual energy replaced by a rare seriousness. His hands moved across the console, his eyes darting between readouts. "The resonance disruptor needs more time to recharge, and the shields—" He paused, swallowing hard. "They're adapting to our defenses. If we don't change the game, we're finished." The words hit the crew like a blow. Fear flickered in their eyes, but no one dared to speak it aloud. Mara's jaw tightened, her mind racing as she weighed their options. Outside, the Zareth ships began their assault again, their weapons firing in unison. The Sentinel shuddered violently under the onslaught, the shields flaring brighter than ever, but the strain was visible. Cracks of light danced across the protective barrier, like glass about to shatter. "They're testing us," Lyra Vaughn said quietly from her station, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're waiting for us to break." "And they won't have to wait much longer," Rylan muttered, his fingers gripping the edge of his console. "We're running out of time." The ship groaned beneath them as another volley struck, the lights on the bridge flickering briefly. Mara turned to her crew, her expression calm but resolute. "We're not done yet," she said firmly, her voice cutting through the rising panic. "We've faced worse odds before." But even as she spoke, she knew the truth. The Sentinel was alone, outnumbered and outgunned. Reinforcements weren't coming, not in time. A sudden beep from the communications console broke her thoughts, and the comms officer turned to her with a startled expression. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from Earth Fleet Command." "Put it through," Mara said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. The voice that came through was calm but distant, as if it were speaking from another world entirely. "Sentinel, this is Earth Fleet Command. Reinforcements are en route, but their ETA is several hours. Hold your position. Do not let the Zareth advance beyond your location." Mara's lips pressed into a thin line. Several hours. The words echoed in her mind like a death sentence. She glanced at the view screen, where the Zareth ships continued their relentless assault. The Sentinel didn't have hours. They barely had minutes. She took a deep breath, turning back to her crew. "We're on our own," she said, her voice firm. "If we fall here, Earth won't even know what's coming. We can't let that happen." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The crew looked at her, their fear giving way to something else, a quiet determination. They knew the stakes. They knew what was at risk. And they knew their captain wouldn't give up, no matter how dire the situation. Mara stepped closer to the view screen, her eyes narrowing as she studied the Zareth formation. "They think they've got us cornered," she said, her voice low but filled with steel. "But they've underestimated us before. Let's make sure they regret it." Rylan looked up from his console, a flicker of hope returning to his face. "You've got a plan?" he asked, his tone cautious but eager. Mara's gaze didn't waver. "Not yet," she admitted. "But we're not going down without a fight." Outside, the Zareth ships began to close the circle, their weapons charging for another coordinated strike. The Sentinel shuddered again as another barrage hit, the shields flickering dangerously. Time was running out, but Mara refused to let despair take hold. She could feel the weight of her crew's trust, their silent belief that she would find a way, and she would. She had to. The asteroid field loomed ahead, a vast graveyard of ancient, tumbling rocks suspended in the void. Each asteroid was a silent giant, some as small as a shuttle, others the size of cities, their jagged surfaces glinting faintly in the distant starlight. The field churned with slow, deliberate chaos, a labyrinth of drifting stone and shadow. It was a place where one wrong move could mean instant destruction, but for Mara, it was their only chance. Her voice cut through the tense silence on the bridge. "Take us in," she commanded, her tone steady despite the storm of fear swirling in her chest. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, but no one protested. They trusted her, trusted that she wouldn't lead them into this death trap without reason. The Sentinel plunged into the asteroid field, its hull groaning under the strain of sharp maneuvers. The ship weaved and twisted through the maze of rocks, the engines flaring as it narrowly avoided collision after collision. On the view screen, the Zareth fleet followed, their sleek ships cutting through the field with unnerving grace. They moved like predators, relentless and unshaken, their formation tightening as they closed in. "They're still on us," Lyra reported, her voice tight with anxiety. "They're not hesitating." Mara's jaw clenched. She had hoped the asteroid field would slow the Zareth down, but they were too skilled, too precise. Every maneuver the Asterisk Sentinel made, the Zareth mirrored with chilling ease. It was as if they could anticipate her every move. "Then we'll give them something they Asterisk can't predict," Mara said, her mind racing. She turned to Rylan, who was hunched over his console, his fingers flying across the controls as he monitored the ship systems. "Rylan, we need an edge, now." Rylan looked up, his face pale but determined. "There's one thing we can try," he said, his voice low. "The resonance disruptor. If we fire it at one of those bigger asteroids, we could destabilize it. The shockwave might create a chain reaction, take out some of their ships, scatter the rest." Mara's eyes narrowed. "And us?" Rylan hesitated. "If we time it right, we'll be clear of the blast zone. But if we're even a second off?" The unspoken words hung heavy in the air. Mara didn't flinch. "Do it," she said. "We don't have another choice." Rylan nodded, his hands moving quickly as he calibrated the disruptor. The hum of the weapon began to build, a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to pulse through the ship. The crew braced themselves, their breaths shallow as they waited for the plan to unfold. "Target locked," Rylan said, his voice tense. "Firing now." The disruptor unleashed its energy in a blinding pulse, striking a massive asteroid just ahead of the Sentinel asterisk. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the asteroid shuddered, cracks spidering across its surface as the energy destabilized it. A heartbeat later, it exploded, fragments of rock shooting outward in a violent cascade. The chain reaction was immediate. The explosion triggered nearby asteroids, their unstable masses breaking apart in a domino effect. The void was filled with chaos, shards of rock hurtling in every direction, colliding with terrifying force. The Zareth ships, caught in the maelstrom, scrambled to evade the debris. Two of their vessels weren't fast enough. One was struck by a massive fragment, its hull crumpling like paper before it erupted in a fiery burst. The other was torn apart by a barrage of smaller rocks, its remains swallowed by the chaos. The remaining Zareth ships scattered, their formation broken for the first time. On the bridge of the Sentinel asterisk, a brief cheer rose from the crew, but it was quickly silenced as the ship shuddered violently. The explosion had left its mark. The shields were flickering, barely holding, and the engines sputtered, their power fading with every passing second. "Damage report," Mara demanded, her voice sharp. "Shields critically low," Lyra said, her hands trembling as she read the data. "Engines are failing. We've lost maneuverability." Mara's stomach sank. They had bought themselves time, but at a heavy cost. The Sentinel was vulnerable now, a sitting target if the Zareth regrouped. She turned back to the view screen, where the remnants of the Zareth fleet were already beginning to recover, their ships moving with renewed purpose. "We need a new strategy," she said, her voice quiet but firm. Her mind raced, searching for options, for anything that could turn the tide. The asteroid field had given them a momentary advantage, but it wasn't enough. The Zareth were relentless, and the Sentinel was running out of time. The crew looked to her, their faces pale but resolute. They trusted her even now, even as the odds stacked higher against them. Mara felt the weight of their faith, the unspoken plea in their eyes. "Save us." She took a deep breath, her gaze hardening. The Zareth thought they had cornered her, but Mara wasn't done fighting. Not yet. If there was a way out of this, she would find it. And if there wasn't, then she would make one. The Sentinel hung in the void, battered and broken, its hull scorched from countless battles. The air on the bridge was thick with tension, every breath shallow, every heartbeat heavy. Mara stood at the center, her gaze fixed on the view screen where the Zareth fleet loomed like a storm on the horizon. Their ships moved with precision, tightening the noose as they prepared for the final blow. There was no escape now. No reinforcements, no miracles, only the grim reality of the fight ahead. Mara's voice, steady and unyielding, cut through the silence. "We make our stand here," she said, her tone leaving no room for doubt. "If this is the end, we'll make it one they'll never forget." The crew didn't flinch. There were no protests, no hesitation. They had followed her through every impossible challenge, and they would follow her now, even into death. Their faces, pale but resolute, reflected the quiet courage of those who had nothing left to lose. Ryland stepped forward, his expression grim but determined. "There's one last thing we can try," he said, his voice low. "It's risky, suicidal even, but it might work." He hesitated, glancing at the others before continuing. "We overload the ship's core. Create an electromagnetic pulse strong enough to disable the Zareth fleet." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Mara's eyes narrowed. "And the Sentinel?" "It won't survive," Rylan admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "The pulse will fry our systems too. We'll be dead in the water." A heavy silence fell over the bridge. The crew exchanged glances, their expressions somber but unwavering. They understood the cost. They understood what was at stake. "We're with you, Captain," Lyra said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "Whatever it takes." One by one, the others nodded, their resolve shining through the despair. They had made their choice. If this was to be their final act, they would make it count. Mara felt a swell of pride and sorrow as she looked at her crew. These were her people, brave, loyal, and unyielding. They deserved better than this. But there was no time for regret, only action. "Rylan, get it done," she ordered. "Everyone else prepare for impact. This is it." The ship came alive, with a flurry of activity. The crew moved with quiet efficiency, their faces set with grim determination. Rylan worked furiously at his station, his hands shaking as he bypassed safety protocols and began the overload sequence. The hum of the ship's core grew louder, a deep, ominous vibration that seemed to resonate through the very bones of the Sentinel asterisk. Outside, the Zareth fleet drew closer, their ships gleaming like knives in the darkness. They moved with predatory grace, their weapons charging for the final strike. On the viewscreen, the lead ship loomed larger and larger, its sleek hull glowing with an eerie light. "Core overload in progress," Rylan reported, his voice tight. "We've got one shot at this." Mara nodded, her gaze never leaving the enemy ships. "Hold steady," she said, her voice calm despite the chaos. "Wait for my signal." The Sentinel surged forward, its engines burning brighter than ever before. The ship moved with a desperate, reckless speed, cutting through the void like a comet. The Zareth ships reacted immediately, their formation shifting to intercept. Mara could feel the tension mounting, every second stretching into eternity. "Almost there," Ryland said, his fingers flying over the controls. "Just a little longer." The Zareth opened fire, their weapons lighting up the darkness with deadly precision. The Sentinel shuddered under the assault, its hull groaning as the shields flickered and failed. Sparks flew from the consoles, the lights dimming as systems began to fail. But the ship pressed on, its engines roaring with defiance. "Now!" Mara shouted, her voice ringing through the chaos. Rylan hit the final command, and the ship's core unleashed its fury. A blinding pulse of energy erupted from the Sentinel, spreading outward in a wave of light and sound. The shockwave tore through space, slamming into the Zareth fleet with devastating force. Their ships went dark, their sleek forms drifting lifelessly as their systems were fried by the EMP. On the bridge of the Sentinel, the lights flickered once, twice, and then died. The hum of the engines faded into silence, leaving only the faint creak of the hull as the ship drifted aimlessly. The crew sat in the darkness, their faces illuminated by the faint glow of emergency lights. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and ozone, the silence broken only by the sound of labored breathing. Mara stood motionless, her hands gripping the edge of her console. The viewscreen was dark, but she didn't need to see to know the outcome. They had done it. The Zareth fleet was disabled, their advance halted. Earth was safe for now. But the cost had been high. The Sentinel was dead, its power drained, its systems fried. They were stranded, alone in the void with no way to call for help. Mara closed her eyes, a wave of exhaustion washing over her. They had survived, but for how long? "Captain," Lyra said softly, her voice breaking the silence. "We did it." Mara opened her eyes, her gaze sweeping over her crew. They were battered, bruised, but alive. And for now, that was enough. "Good work," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of what they had lost. "You all did good." The Sentinel drifted in the vast emptiness, a lone survivor in a sea of destruction. The stars above seemed brighter now, their light cutting through the darkness like a promise. They had made their stand and they had won. But the fight wasn't over, not yet. The Sentinel drifted in the silent void, its hull battered and scarred, a ghost of the mighty ship it once was. The hours stretched on, each moment heavy with uncertainty as the crew waited, their breaths shallow, their bodies aching from the ordeal. The emergency lights cast an eerie glow across the bridge, illuminating faces etched with exhaustion and relief. They had survived. Somehow, against all odds, they had survived. When Earth's reinforcements finally arrived, the sight was both a salvation and a heartbreak. The fleet's gleaming ships cut through the darkness like saviors, their lights piercing the void as they approached the wreckage of the Zareth fleet. The once imposing enemy vessels now floated lifelessly, their sleek forms twisted and broken, scattered like debris across the stars. The Sentinel barely held together, its hull riddled with cracks and burns, its systems dead. The crew, pale and weary, stood at the airlocks as rescue teams boarded. The moment the hatches opened, there was a collective sigh of relief, a release of tension that had gripped them for hours. Medics moved quickly, tending to the wounded, while engineers marveled at the ship's condition. Despite the damage, it was still intact, a testament to its resilience and the crew's determination. As the crew was transported to the safety of the reinforcements, word of their victory began to spread. Across the galaxy, whispers turned into shouts and shouts into celebrations. The story of the Sentinel and its brave crew became a beacon of hope for humanity, a tale of defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. The Zareth Dominion, once seen as an unstoppable force, now faced something they had never encountered before. Fear, Fleet Command wasted no time. The remains of the Sentinel were towed back to Earth, where engineers and scientists swarmed over it, eager to unlock its secrets. Every piece of its technology, every innovation born from desperation during the battle, was studied and replicated. The Sentinel became the blueprint for a new generation of warships, ships that could stand toe-to-toe with the Zareth and protect humanity from further threats. But the Sentinel itself was not forgotten. The ship, once considered expendable, was repaired and preserved. It was placed in a grand hangar, its scars left visible as a reminder of the battle it had endured. People from across the galaxy came to see it, to stand in awe of the vessel that had defied the Zareth and lived to tell the tale. For Mara and her crew, the Sentinel was more than a ship. It was a symbol of their courage, their sacrifice, and their unwavering spirit. Mara and her crew were reassigned to a new flagship, a state-of-the-art vessel built using the Sentinel's technology. But as they boarded their new home, they couldn't help but glance back at the Sentinel, its silhouette standing proud against the backdrop of Earth. It had carried them through the darkest moments, and though they were moving on, the bond they shared with the ship would never fade. Months later, the stars stretched endlessly before Mara as she stood on the bridge of the Vanguard Earth's newest and most advanced warship. The ship was a masterpiece, a culmination of everything humanity had learned from the Sentinel. Its sleek design gleamed under the artificial lights of the hangar, its hull brimming with technology that had been forged in the fires of battle. Mara's hands rested lightly on the edge of her command console as she surveyed the bustling crew. There was a quiet energy in the air, a mixture of anticipation and determination. This was a new chapter, not just for her, but for humanity. The Vanguard was more than a ship, it was a promise. A promise that humanity would never again be caught unprepared. "Status report," Mara said, her voice calm but commanding. "All systems are green," Rylan replied from his station, his fingers dancing over the controls. "Engines are primed, weapons are online, and shields are holding at full capacity." Lyra turned from her console, a small smile playing on her lips. "Sensors are clear. No immediate threats detected." Mara nodded, a faint smile of her own tugging at the corners of her mouth. For the first time in months she felt something close to peace, but that peace was short-lived. "Captain," Lyra said suddenly, her voice sharp with urgency. "We've got movement on the outer edge of the solar system. Multiple signatures, it's the Zareth." The bridge fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. Mara's gaze hardened as she straightened, her mind already racing through strategies. The Zareth were back, and this time they weren't just probing, they were coming in force. "Numbers?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tension crackling in the air. "Dozens," Lyra said, her hands flying over the console. "Maybe more. They're deploying in attack formation." Mara's heart pounded, but she refused to let fear take hold. This was what they had prepared for. This was why the Asterisk Sentinel had fought so hard, to give humanity a fighting chance. "Take us out," she ordered, her voice firm and resolute. "Let us show them what we're made of." The Asterisk Vanguard surged forward, its engines roaring to life as it left the safety of the hangar. Around it, Earth's fleet moved into position, a formidable wall of ships armed with the best technology humanity had to offer. The stars seemed to shimmer with anticipation as the fleet advanced, their formation tight and unyielding. On the bridge, Mara stood tall, her eyes fixed on the approaching Zareth fleet. The fear that had once gripped her was gone, replaced by a fierce determination. They were no longer the desperate survivors of the Asterisk Sentinel. They were warriors, armed with knowledge, strength, and the unbreakable spirit of humanity. As the Zareth ships came into view, their dark forms cutting through the starlight, Mara felt a surge of pride. The Sentinel Asterisk, once a forgotten relic, had become a legend. Its legacy lived on, not just in the Asterisk Vanguard Asterisk, but in every ship, every weapon, every person who stood ready